Okay, the last section of Chapter 2 is on properties of numbers. All of these properties have to do with the addition and multiplication. And it's ones we've seen before. And so, in the notes we took in class today, I was trying to give you a couple different ways to remember what all these properties were. The first thing was we looked at each of the words and discussed what they meant. So if we have the associative property, associate is who you are grouped with. Okay? And so the associative property talks about grouping symbols and that they can be moved. It says if I have these three numbers added up, I can change which ones get added first. I'll get the same answer. In either case here, when I add up, I will get 12. And we're saying multiplying. It doesn't. If I'm multiplying the same three numbers, it doesn't matter what order they get multiplied in. So which ones grouped together. Either way here, I will get 36 for my answer. Okay. And so I gave you a picture to help you remind you of this. And if there are two people, Joe and Sue are friends, and then they meet Bob, the three of them are friends. And it wouldn't matter if Sue and Bob met first and then met Joe afterwards. It's still the same group of people. The same three people are all friends. So it doesn't matter who was associated together first. It's still the same three people are all friends. The second one was the commutative property. And we said that the word commute means you can go back and forth. And it'll be the same. Like if I commute to and from work, as long as I take the same route, it's going to take me the same amount of time, and I'm going to be driving the same number of miles to and from. And that's what the commutative property says. The order doesn't matter. I can go back and forth. I'll get the same answer. So 5 plus 3 is 8, and so is 3 plus 5. Or 4 times 7 is 28, so is 7 times 4. So commutative property says the order doesn't matter. I can go back and forth. I'll get the same thing. And so the picture we use to remember that is a picture of me carpooling to and from school and home. Third property was the identity property. And we talked about in class that your identity is who you are. And you really don't change who you are as a person. You can change your looks, your name, whatever, but it doesn't actually change who you are. And so we asked what numbers, if I'm adding, doesn't change anything, and that's 0. And then I asked what numbers, if I'm multiplying doesn't change anything, and that is 1. And so anything plus 0 is still that number, and anything times 1 is still that number. So our identity property is what doesn't change anything, and that's 0 and 1. So our picture is just a star. It doesn't matter what I start with. I can add 0 or multiply by 1, and I get the exact same thing. Okay, the fourth one is the multiplicative inverse. And another name for that is the reciprocal. When I'm trying to find the inverse, what I'm trying to find is if I give you a number like 3/4, the inverse is the number I would multiply this by in order to get an answer of 1. That's what inverse means. And so we talked in class how if I just flip this over, I would get 12 over 12, which is 1. And so the inverse of 5 over 12 is 12 over 5. You just flip the fraction over. Because when I do that, when I multiply those two together, I will always get 1. And so then we just remember that if I have a whole number, I make it into a fraction, I put it in over 1, so its inverse would be 1/5. That's how I would get 1 there. If I have a mixed number, like 1 3/4, I need to change this into an improper fraction first by doing 4 times 1 plus 3, which is 7, over 4, and I can find the inverse by flipping that over and getting 4/7. And so the picture we used for the inverse of the reciprocal was just somebody doing a flip, because that's all you have to do is flip over the fraction. And the last property we did is distributive property. And we said that the word distribute means to give out evenly. And so what the distributive property says, if I have an addition in here inside of grouping symbols, and I'm multiplying that by a number, I could get the same answer by this 3 giving out its multiplication to each of these. So in other words, do 3 times 5 and 3 times 6 and then add those together. You can see these will work because 5 plus 6 is 11. 11 times 3 is 33. Where 3 times 5 is 15. 3 times 6 is 18. If I add those, I also will get 33. So that's what distributive property says, is you can give out this multiplication. As long as you give it to everybody inside the parentheses, you'll get the same answer. So our little picture to remind us of this is me giving out homework to everybody. And the point that goes along with this for the homework, we talked about doing a problem like 3 times 1 1/5. We can actually use the distributive property and say, well, I can just do 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 1/5 is 3/5. So my answer is 3 3/5. And that's how I can use distributive properties to do these problems on the homework. And those are the properties we talked about today.